Welcome back to the deep dive. We are diving into a really interesting topic this time, virtual reality marketing.
It really does feel like everyone's talking about this VR stuff.
Right, we've got a stack of resources here, and it's clear VR is not just some futuristic fantasy anymore.
Yeah, it's becoming the present, especially in the marketing world.
You shared some excerpts from virtual reality marketing, immersive brand experiences, and it looks like it gets into the nitty-gritty.
That's a great primer. It doesn't assume you're a tech whiz or anything.
And it even offers tips for incorporating VR on a budget, which I think is really helpful for our listeners.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the guide keeps coming back to this idea of VR marketing as a shift from telling to experiencing. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's a fundamental change in how brands connect with their audience. Think about how traditional marketing works. Essentially, it's telling you a story about a product. VR. It drops you right into that story.
So instead of just hearing about it, you're living it.
Exactly. The guide uses the example of IKEA. Instead of just, flipping through a catalog, you can put on a headset and design your dream kitchen. You can virtually walk around in it, open drawers, the whole 9 yards.
That's incredible. I can see how that would be so much more impactful than just looking at a static image in a catalog or on a website.
It's way more engaging.
It reminds me that Volvo campaign, where they let people test drive cars using VR. The guide mentioned that too.
Oh, that's a great example. Volvo actually saw a 190% increase in car sales after launching that.
Wow. That's the power of try before you buy, right? But it's got to be more than just the novelty of it.
It is. Think about it. It taps into something deeper than just the features of the car. This is the psychology piece, right?
Yeah.
It plays on those emotions of buying a car, that sense of freedom, control, aspiration even. And it made those feelings almost tangible through the VR experience.
And in a world that's constantly bombarding us with digital distractions, that kind of immersive experience is, priceless.
Totally. Think about the last time you saw someone completely engrossed in a VR headset. They are literally in another world.
They really are. And for brands, that level of engagement, it's like striking gold.
It's huge GE. But it's more than just capturing someone's full attention. The guide also refers to VR as a data goldmine.
Okay, so what kind of data are we talking about? What's so special about the data from VR?
Every interaction, every single one within a VR experience can be tracked.
So where someone looks, how they move, all of that.
Exactly. What they pick up, how long they engage with something, everything. It's like having X-ray vision into your target audience's mind.
So you're not just seeing what people say they're interested in, like on a survey or something. You're seeing how they actually behave.
Exactly. In a virtual representation of a real-world scenario, which is incredible.
That's amazing. And that data can be revolutionary for companies, I imagine.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And you can see firsthand what truly grabs someone's attention, what makes them hesitate, what ultimately drives their decisions.
And that is invaluable for businesses.
Invaluable.
This all sounds very high-tech and expensive, though. Is VR marketing only for giant corporations with massive budgets?
That's a common misconception. The guide actually addresses that. It provides a lot of budget-friendly options for incorporating VR.
Even if you're not a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, even then.
So what are some of these more accessible ways to use VR? You must have some insider knowledge here.
Well, one thing the guide recommends is exploring mobile VR.
Okay.
You don't need those expensive, high-end headsets to create a compelling experience.
So something like Google Cardboard would work.
Exactly. Something as simple as Google Cardboard, paired with a well-designed 360-degree video, can give users a taste of VR.
That makes sense. Can you explain the difference between something like Google Cardboard and the more high-end VR systems? I think some listeners might not fully understand how those are different.
Sure. So with those high-end systems, you've got external sensors that track your movement in a dedicated space. This creates a truly immersive experience. Mobile VR uses your phone's sensors and screen.
I see. So it's using what your phone already has.
Right. And it might not be as immersive as those top-of-the-line systems, but it's a fantastic entry point for brands and consumers who are just dipping their toes into the VR pool.
So it's a more accessible way to experiment with VR before diving into the deep end. And 360-degree videos, those fall somewhere in between, right?
Exactly. They offer a sense of immersion, letting you look around in a full 360-degree view, but you're not walking around in a virtual environment.
They're not interactive in the same way.
Right. And they're relatively inexpensive to produce, and most people can experience them with just a smartphone and a simple headset.
That's really helpful to know. So even smaller businesses can create some pretty incredible VR experiences without, breaking the bank.
Absolutely. And the guide even mentions collaborating with VR content creators. There's a growing community of really talented individuals and studios that specialize in this stuff.
Oh, interesting.
So you can leverage their expertise without having to build an entire VR department in-house.
It's like outsourcing your VR marketing to the pros. Smart move.
I'm already getting excited about the possibilities here.
What's really inspiring is seeing how some brands are already using VR successfully. The guide highlights several real-world examples, like Marriott's V-Room service.
Oh, I read about that. They created these virtual travel experiences for their hotel guests. What a cool idea. It was brilliant. Guests could put on a headset and be transported to a beach in Hawaii or a mountaintop in the Alps, all without leaving their hotel room.
That's amazing. And it wasn't just a gimmick. The guide mentioned that it was a huge success for Marriott,
It's
right?
huge. Not only did it create a lot of buzz and media attention, but it actually boosted brand loyalty and encouraged people to book those dream vacations they were experiencing virtually.
I can see why. It's one thing to see pictures of a beautiful destination, but it's another thing entirely to feel like you're actually there.
You hit the nail on the head. That emotional connection is what makes VR marketing so powerful. It's not just about conveying information. It's about creating an experience that stays with the consumer long after the headset comes off.
It's like the difference between like reading a travel brochure and actually visiting a destination.
Exactly. One is informative, but the other creates a lasting memory. VR lets brands bypass the telling and go straight to the experiencing.
And that's a game changer in terms of making a lasting impression.
For sure, it's about forging a genuine connection, something that traditional advertising often really struggles with.
It does, but of course, it can't all be smooth sailing in the world of VR, right? There have to be some challenges, you're telling me. The guide actually lists cost, technical limitations, and even consumer resistance as, potential bumps in the road.
Yeah, for sure.
Starting with the cost, how much of a barrier is that really for companies wanting to do VR marketing?
It's true. Those high-end VR setups can be a big investment, especially for smaller businesses.
Right.
But the good news is that the cost is going down as VR tech becomes more mainstream. What seemed, insanely expensive a few years ago is now within reach for more companies.
Right. And as we were saying, there are those more affordable options,
Exactly.
like mobile VR and those 360-degree videos.
Yes.
A good way to dip your toes in, right? What about the technical limitations? I've heard some people complain about motion sickness with VR, and the headsets themselves can be like bulky and awkward. Have those issues been worked out?
Oh, yeah, they're valid concerns,
Yeah.
for sure. But the technology is evolving so quickly.
That's the thing with technology.
Headsets are getting lighter, more comfortable, and the software is getting better at reducing that motion sickness.
Good,
Yeah.
because that's always a deal breaker if you're trying to show someone something. What about the consumer resistance? Why are some people hesitant to try VR?
I think it's a couple of things. Some people just don't like to try new things,
Mm.
especially when it comes to tech.
Yeah.
There's also maybe a fear of the unknown,
Hmm.
maybe thinking that VR could be isolating.
Or addictive.
Yes.
Agree with that.
And those are all understandable concerns. But as VR becomes more commonplace, I think a lot of that resistance will just naturally fade away.
Sure, because people will see their friends using it and it'll seem less weird.
Right, exactly. It's like the more you see something, the more normal it becomes.
Right.
But then there's the whole data privacy thing, right?
Yes. VR experiences can collect a lot of information about a person,
A lot.
which makes some people nervous, understandably.
Oh, for sure. And the guide it dedicates a whole section to that, to data privacy. It emphasizes, it stresses the importance of transparency.
Right.
Brands need to be very upfront with their customers, what data they're collecting from those VR experiences
Okay.
and how they're using it. More importantly, really, how they're using it.
So that's number one, transparency builds trust. And that's super important, especially when it comes to any of this new marketing technology. People are understandably a little wary about how their information is being used.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how companies are using it and how transparent they're being with the consumers. So navigating all of that is super key to wider adoption of VR. But despite those challenges, the potential benefits seem enormous. I feel like we always talk about VR for product demos, like that IKEA kitchen or virtual tours like the Marriott thing. But this guide goes beyond that.
It does.
It talks about VR for training and education.
Oh, yeah. And that's huge. Imagine medical students performing virtual surgeries.
Or firefighters.
Yeah.
practicing for those really tough, stressful
Just
situations.
all through VR. It's like
Yeah.
next level learning,
Right. The guide even talks about VR for virtual tourism,
which is amazing, right?
allowing people to experience, far off destinations, the Great Wall of China or something,
Yes.
from their living room. What a great way to give more people access to these amazing experiences, especially if they have mobility issues or just can't afford to travel like that.
Absolutely. You said it. It lets people experience things they might never be able to otherwise.
Right. It just opens up so many possibilities.
And it's only going to get more and more innovative as the technology develops. It's a really cool time to be watching all of this unfold.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface of what VR can do. But with all this talk about virtual experiences, it makes me think about something you mentioned earlier, this idea of VR marketing as a way to create more authentic brand connections. That seems almost counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It's a fascinating paradox. In a world that's becoming increasingly virtual, there's this growing desire for authenticity, for real, genuine experiences. So the question becomes, can VR, with its simulated environments, actually deliver on that desire? Can a brand truly connect with a consumer through a headset?
It's a great question. On the one hand, VR has this incredible ability to create these powerful emotional experiences that can feel incredibly real. When you're fully immersed in a well-designed VR environment, you forget about the real world. You lose yourself in the experience.
Exactly. That feeling of presence, of being physically present in another space, can be so strong that it actually triggers a sense of authenticity, even if you know logically that it's not real.
It's like the difference between watching a nature documentary and actually being out in the wilderness, feeling the sun on your skin, the wind in your hair. Both can be awe-inspiring, but the latter creates a visceral connection that's hard to replicate.
Exactly, and that's the power of VR. It allows brands to create these incredibly vivid, visceral experiences that go beyond the screen. But that brings us to the other side of the coin, the risk that VR could become just another marketing gimmick.
Something that feels gimmicky and superficial. You try it once because it's cool and new, but it doesn't have that lasting impact.
Exactly, and I think that's the real challenge for brands navigating this new landscape. How do you harness the power of VR to create truly meaningful, authentic connections, experiences that resonate on a deeper level without it feeling like a shallow marketing ploy?
It's a delicate balance for sure. It reminds me of the early days of social media. Initially, it was this fresh, authentic way for people to connect, but as brands rushed in, it became more about selling and less about genuine interaction.
It's about finding that sweet spot where the technology enhances the human experience without overshadowing it. VR has to be used thoughtfully, strategically, to create experiences that feel authentic and resonate with people's values. It has to be about more than just novelty.
Well said. So as we step into this new era of virtual reality marketing, the big question is, how can brands use this powerful tool responsibly? How do they ensure that VR enhances rather than diminishes the human experience? What do you think?
I think it starts with remembering that behind every headset is a human being looking for a genuine connection. VR allows us to create these incredible immersive experiences, but it's crucial to use this technology thoughtfully, ethically, always striving for authenticity and human connection. If brands can manage that, I think the future of VR marketing is incredibly bright.
Absolutely. This deep dive into VR marketing has been incredibly eye-opening. It feels like we're on the verge of a seismic shift in the way brands and consumers connect.
It certainly does. And as VR technology continues to evolve, it will be fascinating to see how brands rise to the challenge, using this immersive medium to create genuinely meaningful experiences. One thing is certain, the future of marketing is about to get a whole lot more interesting.
Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into VR marketing. Until next time.